Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you all so much for joining. We are really excited to be here this evening for our special Earth Day installment of our Livable Future Live event series. I'm going to give people just another minute or so to get logged in here since we just hit the top of the hour. So we'll just give folks another minute to join us here on Zoom before we go ahead and get started. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and share my screen here. All right, looks like folks are starting to get logged on. While everyone is logging on, please go ahead and take a minute to introduce yourself in the chat. You can share your name and where you're joining us from today, just so we can get to know each other a little bit. And in the meantime, I will go over a couple of quick housekeeping reminders and some upcoming event announcements for you all. So first, I'll just share a couple quick Zoom reminders for everybody. If you need to turn on closed captioning to add subtitles to your screen, just go ahead and click on the Show Captions button that you see in your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen to turn those on. Feel free to continue to use the chat box this evening to continue to have conversations with each other as we're listening to the discussion tonight. And we will also have some time for Q&A with Mark at the end. So if you have questions for him as you're listening, please add those to the Q&A box. Instead of the chat box, make sure you drop those in the Q&A box. So it's easier for us to keep track of those when we get to the question and answer section of our agenda later tonight. And finally, I am recording today's event, and I will share that later with everyone who has RSVP'd. Okay, so a bit of background on who we are. Food and Water Watch is a national organization fighting for safe food, clean water, and a livable climate for all of us. And we do this by mobilizing grassroots activists to build political power at all levels of government. And we host this monthly event series called Livable Future Live as a place to come together as a community to learn more about current events, have policy conversations, and hear from leading experts on the issues. So I invite you to join us again next month on May 24th, when we'll be talking about the Farm Bill, which is a massive piece of legislation that's rewritten every 5 years and has the power to shape our food system. And next month, we'll be discussing what the Farm Bill is and the policies that we are fighting to include to ensure that our food system is more sustainable and equitable. And we'll go ahead and put the link in the chat where you can sign up for that. All right, so before I introduce our guest, Mark Jacobson, I wanted to share a special opportunity with you all to win your very own copy of his new book, which we'll be discussing tonight. It's called No Miracles Needed: How Today's Technology Can Save Our Climate and Clean Our Air. And we have 3 copies of the book that we are going to be giving away tonight. So if you'd like, please go ahead and enter the drawing to win one of these copies. I will go ahead and put a link in the chat where you can enter your name. And, the book is just a really important discussion about the urgent need to transition off of fossil fuels. And it details the renewable energy technology that we already have at our disposal. So it talks about how we don't need these so-called miracle technologies like carbon capture, because we already have truly clean sources like wind and water and solar that can provide reliable energy supplies, all while eliminating air pollution and preventing the worst impacts of the climate crisis. So, really a no-brainer. So if you're interested in reading it, I encourage you to add your name to our drawing within the next hour to make sure that you get a copy if you win our raffle, and I will be contacting our winners tomorrow morning. And I also just wanted to share that, since we are only a few days away from Earth Day, this is an especially timely conversation that we're about to have. Earth Day is always an important time of the year to reflect on how far we've come, but also set our sights on what still needs to be done. And Food and Water Watch is fighting for a future without fossil fuels. And we are working alongside communities across the country to shut down fossil fuel projects, stop the build out of dangerous pipelines, and mobilize support for a transition to renewable energy. And every day we are making progress toward that future, but we know that there's so much more that needs to be done. And it's because of you that we are able to do that work. You may have seen this week that in honor of Earth Day, we've had a 3-to-1 match for any gifts made this week. But as a special bonus for tonight, that match has been increased to $4 for every $1 donated. So whether you are making a one-time gift or you're signing up to become a partner by making a monthly donation, your gift funds our fight for this renewable energy future. And with the upgraded match, your gift goes even farther. So you can make a gift at any point during the event tonight by texting the word gift to the number 23321, or you can click on the link that we'll put in the chat for you. And as we'll hear tonight from Professor Jacobson, we have the technology that we need. This renewable energy future is not just a dream, it's something that we have the technology and ability to reach, and with your support, we can. All right, so let's turn to our program and hear more from Mark Jacobson himself. Mark is a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Stanford University. His career has focused on better understanding air pollution and global warming problems and developing large-scale clean renewable energy solutions to them. And he has also developed computer models to examine grid stability in the presence of 100% renewable energy, and has designed roadmaps to transition countries, states, cities, and towns to 100% clean renewable energy for all purposes. And tonight we'll be talking more about his new book, No Miracles Needed, How Today's Technology Can Save Our Climate and Clean Our Air. So welcome, Mark. We are so glad that you could join us tonight. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Kate. Really happy to be here.
Awesome. So let's dive right in. It's my understanding that we go a long way back, that you and Food and Water Watch have been on the same side of these issues, fighting alongside each other to stop fossil fuels for years. I saw that in your book, you talk about your involvement in the fight to ban fracking in New York, which Food and Water Watch was also a key player in. And I would bet that there are people on this call tonight who are part of that too. Go ahead and say hi in the chat if you are. But thanks to the collective efforts of everyone involved and your leadership, we won. We banned fracking in 2014. So to start us off, I'm just curious, what was it like to be a part of that movement?
Well, it was amazing. And of course, I didn't lead that effort at all, but I did contribute in terms of providing an alternative to fracking. That's kind of my contribution was, well, I met with Mark Ruffalo and Josh Fox back in 2011, who were part of the leading that effort to ban fracking. And, they basically wanted an alternative because the governor, in order to ban it, really has to be comfortable that there's something else that can take its place, natural gas's place. And so we'd been developing plans, actually a worldwide plan for transitioning to wind, water, and solar. And I was basically asked to develop a plan for New York State. And at first I said, well, it's going to take a lot of effort. I know how much work this would take to develop a whole plan for New York State. So I kind of balked and said, well, I'll write one paragraph and hopefully somebody else can take the rest of it. But after I started writing that paragraph, I got inspired and ended up overnight putting together a 14-page plan for New York State to transition to 100% renewable energy. I mean, of course, it took it a year and a half for that plan and 35 more versions of it to get published as a New York State energy plan. But that was used not only by the governor's office, but also by activists and a lot of people in New York State to argue against fracking and say, we have an alternative, we have something else. And in fact, the governor of New York subsequently did pass a 50% renewables law and subsequently 100% renewables law by 2040 in the electric power sector. So I feel very proud that I was able to contribute at least to this fight and join all the other people. I mean, this was a group effort for sure. I mean, many groups and many individuals helped, but I'm glad I was able to play some small role.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, it sounds like you were definitely a big player in that. So thank you for your work there. You talked about this a little bit already, but like the core argument of your book is that in order to avoid the worst of the climate crisis, we need our energy to come from what you refer to as WWS, wind, water, and solar. So I'm wondering if you can just tell us, what prompted you to write this book? Why now?
Well, I've been working my whole career. In fact, since I was 13 years old, I've had the goal of trying to understand and solve large-scale air pollution and climate problems through clean renewable energy systems. And so the first part of my career, I was spending building computer models to try to understand the problem. So air pollution computer models, global climate model, and everything in between. And then last 20 years or so, I've been looking at solutions and focusing more on solutions. And this book is really a culmination. I mean, most of my work in the past has been pretty academic, looking, and in fact, I've written textbooks before, but they're very complicated, lots of equations. And this book is actually, I tried to distill down so anybody can read it. And it really summarizes all the work I've done on renewable energy to date, looking at what are the technologies available to solve the problem, what are the things we need to do to solve the problem, well, actually problems, because the three problems I'm really looking at are air pollution, global warming, and energy insecurity. And so the solution in my mind has to solve all three simultaneously. So we can't have a solution that addresses climate, but makes air pollution worse or energy insecurity worse. And so that's what eliminates some technologies. So, I mean, back in 2008, I did an evaluation of different energy technologies, and in terms of their externality impacts, their impacts on air pollution, climate, land use, water supply, reliability, and security, and several other factors. And that's where I concluded that wind, water, and solar technologies were better than like nuclear power, carbon capture, bioenergy, and a few others. And that just because even though some technologies, let's say nuclear, are improvements over coal, for the most part, they're just not as good as wind, water, solar, and they have a lot of problems associated with them. And so, but as we get closer to the deadlines of when we need to solve the problems, we need 80% solution by 2030 and 100% somewhere between 2035 and 2050. We cannot waste time on technologies that either don't exist, take forever to build, are super expensive, or have lots of side effects. And so, yeah, we need to keep our eye on the ball. And so the ball is really clean renewable energy storage, electrification, batteries, fuel cells, with green hydrogen, for example, for some limited applications, heat pumps, electric heat pumps, electrifying industry, energy efficiency, reducing energy use, things that are pretty obvious are what we should focus on. And we should not get involved with carbon capture, direct air capture, blue hydrogen, geoengineering, small modular nuclear reactors, electrofuels, bioenergy. These are things that are not helpful or worsen air pollution or worsen climate problems relative to what if we spent the money on something else. So this book is really talking about all of that, talking about what are the technologies that we need and have, and how to actually keep the grid stable, how to clean up the air and climate problems and security problems, and why we do not need these other technologies I mentioned.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I like how you mentioned that interconnectedness there, because, to me, it just feels like watching the news these days, like this is a book that everybody needs to read right now. Like we saw a few weeks ago, the tragedy in East Palestine with the train derailment, and it's likely we could see more disasters like that if we continue to build out fossil fuel infrastructure. The war in Ukraine continues to highlight the need for energy independence in Europe. So it's urgent, but I think the thing that's super important about your book and the work that you do and what you just said is that it's, educating people that it is entirely possible to transition to renewable energy. We have that ability. So your book goes into really great detail about the variety of technologies that we do have right now. So could you just tell us a little bit more about the primary wind, water, and solar technologies that you describe in the book?
Yeah, sure. Really briefly, well, there's generation of electricity. So with onshore and offshore wind, solar photovoltaics on rooftops and in power plants, concentrated solar power, geothermal electricity and heat, hydroelectricity. We only propose using existing hydroelectricity for conventional dams, although some run-of-the-river hydro can be increased. Some small amounts of tidal and wave power, some solar heat, But then there's storage. We have electricity storage, heat storage, cold storage, and then some hydrogen storage. So electricity storage would be, well, batteries, concentrated solar power with storage, existing hydroelectric dams, pumped hydroelectric storage, compressed air storage, flywheels, gravitational storage with solid masses, some hydrogen fuel cell storage, and then heat storage, underground thermal energy storage in soil and water pits and aquifers, heat and cold storage in water, liquid water, cold storage in ice, storage in building materials, and then there's hydrogen storage. And then we need a well interconnected transmission distribution grid, also electrified appliances and machines. So electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles, some hydrogen fuel cell for long distance transport, electric heat pumps for air heating, air cooling, water heating, and even clothes drying, electric induction cooktops, electrified industry. So electric arc furnaces, induction furnaces, resistance furnaces, dielectric heaters, electron beam heaters, and heat pumps even for industry. So, and then even electric lawnmowers and leaf blowers and even electric fireplaces if you really want to have a fire. So everything would be electric, and that'll just reduce energy use substantially worldwide, about 56% if we electrify everything and provide electricity with wind, water, solar, just due to the efficiency of electricity over combustion. And it'll clean our air and eliminate our climate related emissions from energy.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's just everything under the sun that we could think of there. And you mentioned that, a couple of different sectors, and I know your book like really breaks this down really well from, energy generation, storage, transportation, industry, and buildings. And you just mentioned buildings. And I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into that piece. Food and Water Watch helped pass a ban on fossil fuel hookups in new buildings in New York City. And we, for the past few months, have been lobbying Governor Hochul to expand that victory statewide. So I'm curious, could you talk a little bit more about renewable energy solutions in the building sector that you talk about in your book?
Right. Well, so there's no need for 2 or 3 types of different energy in your home. I mean, electricity can do everything that natural gas or oil or wood chips can do, but can do it better, more efficiently, and cleaner. So I built an all electric home in 2017, and there's no gas on the property at all. Electricity is used for electric heat pumps, for air and water heating and air conditioning, for an electric induction cooktop stove, LED lights, very efficient. The home is very weatherized, no leaks of air outside or inside between the house, outside and inside the house. Energy efficient appliances. And it's amazing in electric cars as well. And I produce, because I have solar on the roof, I'm able to actually produce 20% more electricity than I consume. All these appliances and machines are so efficient that in the annual average, I generate 20% more than I use. And I sell that remainder back to the grid for about $850 a year to the community choice aggregation utility that I subscribe to. So in last 6 years, I've not paid an electric bill, a natural gas bill, or gasoline bill. And I avoided a gas hookup fee, about $6,000. I avoided gas pipes of about $10,000. So the payback time, I already paid back the system after 5 years. There are also subsidies that help pay it back. Without subsidies, it would be about a 10-year payback time. Solar is warranted for 25 years. Point is, definitely for new homes, going all electric is just much more efficient, less expensive. I mean, I have no more energy bills, and I haven't paid an energy bill in 6 years. So, but if you have an existing home, retrofitting, okay, you're not going to get as much benefit, but you'll still get a substantial benefit. You'll eliminate your bills, and there are still subsidies available for retrofits quite a bit through the Inflation Reduction Act. So there'll be a good payback. Even if you're living in an apartment, then you can also subscribe in many states to a community choice aggregation utility that will give you 100% renewable electricity for the same cost as you would pay for your current grid hookup. And you can also go to an electric induction cooktop. You don't need gas. You can buy one for just a single burner for $30 to $80. And so that's one small way to do it. If you can encourage a landlord to replace water heaters with heat pump water heaters, the building heating with heat pump air heating and air conditioning. So there's a lot of individual homeowners or renters can do to affect a transition.
Yeah. And I think, like you mentioned, that we need to reach 80% by 2030, 2035, if I'm remembering correctly. And it just seems like more and more states are going to need to make this type of transition if they're going to meet their climate goals. And I know that you mentioned working on that plan for New York State. So I'm curious if, like, was this a part of the plan, this electrification?
Well, yeah, so we developed plans not only for New York State, but all 50 states, and we've been and also 145 countries worldwide, and actually over 120 cities. And the goal on all these plans is to electrify. And there are several groups and states and countries that have implemented some aspect of these plans, or at least the goals of the plans, not necessarily the specific plans themselves. I mean, there are 62 countries in the world that now have laws or commitments to go to 100% renewables in the electric power sector. There are 19 states and territories. There are 180 US cities. There are over 400 international companies that have committed to going to 100% renewables in their global operations. So there is a lot of movement toward electrification, and we can see, codes being passed in many places. And I think California alone has like maybe somewhere between 40 and 60 cities have passed laws to either prohibit gas in new buildings, or in some cases to remove gas from existing buildings and to electrify more. So this is, and there are many other states are doing this as well. So I think this is it's a very important step, because a lot has been done in the electric power sector, but much less has been done in the building sector and even transportation. Although there are more electric cars going on the road each year, there are probably, I think, 10 million now worldwide. It's still, there are 1.4 billion cars in the world, so we need to replace all of those, and so we have a long way to go.
I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the title of your book, The No Miracles Needed, which I love because it just refers to how we don't need these miracle technologies like carbon capture that, don't work and are just schemes that the fossil fuel industry is proposing. So could you tell us more about, why you refer to them in this way, and what are some of the, miracle technology schemes that we should be suspicious of?
Well, I think the title kind of came because I remember Bill Gates saying we needed a miracle technology, and so he was pushing what he called miracle technologies, that we should invest in things. He said we're not going to be able to do it with what we have. Wind and solar can't do it, and batteries can't do it. So we need miracle technologies. And I was thinking, well, we don't really need miracle technologies, and of course, he's investing in all these things we don't need, like carbon capture. Well, direct air capture is one of his investments. He was investing a lot of bioenergy, and he's been pushing geoengineering quite a bit. He's been pushing electrofuels quite a bit, and small modular nuclear reactors. He's been pushing. So those are more than half of all these things we don't need. He's been really pushing. I mean, he's been pushing some good technologies too, but really what stand out are these technologies that are not useful, that we know are not useful up front. And the other technologies that are not useful are, well, carbon capture, which difference between direct air capture and carbon capture. Carbon capture is trying to capture CO2 from the exhaust stream of a power plant, whereas direct air capture is taking CO2 directly from the air. They both require energy. Blue hydrogen is another one, which is basically natural gas producing hydrogen, but then adding carbon capture to the natural gas plant. And you need two types of carbon capture equipment in that case, because there are two sources of CO2. And so these are all technologies that are either increase air pollution, increase energy insecurity, hardly reduce carbon, or even the ones that where you capture carbon, like direct air capture, carbon capture, blue hydrogen, electrofuels, they all involve carbon capture. Well, the carbon capture, direct air capture, blue hydrogen, what do you do with the CO2? Well, 75% of all CO2 today is used for enhanced oil recovery, to dig more oil out of the ground. But that process releases 40% of the CO2 that you've captured right back to the air. And then you're burning more oil on top of that, releasing even more CO2 and more pollution. And so even if if you were capturing a lot of carbon, then you're just releasing it back to the air just to dig out more oil. So this is just a pyramid scheme, basically. And it's worse in terms of pollution. I mean, if you think about it, if you even if you use renewable electricity to power carbon capture equipment, all you're doing is taking some CO2 out of the air, and you're releasing 40% of it back to the air. But if you took that same renewable energy and you replace that coal plant, you're not only taking out more CO2 than you do with the carbon capture, but you're taking out the air pollution from the coal, you're taking out the mining of the coal, you're eliminating the coal infrastructure. So your social cost benefit is so much larger using renewable energy to replace coal than using renewable energy to power carbon capture to take some CO2 from the coal. It just makes no sense, except if you're a fossil fuel junkie. there's no rational reason for it. It just doesn't make any logical sense why you would just only take CO2 from a process and allow all this other stuff to be emitted and use more land and have more infrastructure and just add to the cost of energy when you can just get cheaper energy just by taking that wind energy or solar and replacing the coal plant in the first place.
Exactly. Like we just need to go right to the source.
Right.
And, since we've been talking about carbon capture, I do want to share for folks on the call tonight, Food and Water Watch is actually running a week of action this week to pressure our members of Congress to stop subsidizing dirty energy scams like carbon capture, which they subsidize with our taxpayer dollars. And we have 2 days left in the week of action, and tomorrow is the biggest day with a phone bank plan to drive thousands of calls to congressional offices to tell them to stop these subsidies. So there's 2 ways that you can help. First, you can take 5 minutes and call your own member of Congress, and we'll put a phone number in the chat that you can call and a short message you can leave. Or second, you can join our phone bank tomorrow night to call constituents and key districts to ask them to call their representatives. So we encourage you to sign up for that to help us drive even more calls, and we'll put the link in the chat for that as well. So just wanted to plug that for folks who want to join our fight to stop carbon capture schemes. Okay, jumping back to your book here. Let's see. I want to talk a little bit as well about energy storage and grid stability. When we spoke previously, you mentioned that oftentimes people who have concerns about the transition fully to renewable energies are sometimes concerned about the stability of electrical grids that are powered fully by renewables. But as you argue in your book, the technology has really come a long way. So what's your assessment of our ability to keep energy grids stable with fully renewable energy sources?
Well, I want to first point out there are 9 countries of the world that are 100% wind, water, solar all year round, every minute of every year. And they're mostly powered by hydro, and hydro is part of it, of a wind, water, solar solution. So that does point out that hydro is not only useful for baseload, but it's also for peaking power and filling in gaps in supply. But for other locations where you don't have so much hydro, there are many options. Okay, so first of all, combining wind and solar. Well, when the wind does not blow, the sun is often shining during the day, and vice versa. Wind and solar are very complementary in nature. So having a combination of wind and solar is very good. And interconnecting wind over long distances and solar over long distances also reduces the variability of wind and solar, because like if the wind's not blowing in one place, it's often blowing somewhere else. And the sun's not shining in one place, it's often shining somewhere else. So connecting over long distances and combining wind and solar is useful. Using hydroelectric to fill in the gaps, that actually accomplishes quite a bit. But then on top of that, we have, there's some geothermal baseload in a lot of places. But on top of that, we have all sorts of other storage options. So batteries, right now, batteries provide about 12% of California's peak electricity demand during all seasons except summer. So like in the winter, spring, and fall in California, the peak demand is around 27 gigawatts, and there are 3.3 gigawatts of batteries installed. So in fact, the batteries are being used twice a day for 2 to 3 to 4 hours in the morning, where there's a peak of electricity demand before the sun rises, and then after the sun sets. And so half of that was added in the last year and a half or so. And so, the batteries are becoming so inexpensive, and they're going on a large scale in a lot of places. And in fact, last Sunday, California, well, not this last Sunday, but this Sunday before, last Sunday, a week ago Sunday, California was 100% wind, water, solar for an hour and a half. So there are periods where we do get just all renewables. South Australia is really heavily, almost 100%, I mean, something over 70% in the annual average of wind, water, and solar. And there are many other places. Scotland's about 91% wind in terms of its consumption of energy. South Dakota produces 126% of its electricity consumed with wind, water, solar. It's 77% wind, and the rest of it's hydro. And it also produces an additional 25% fossil fuels. So it produces 150% of its consumption and then exports the difference. But 126% of its consumption in the annual average is wind, water, solar already. So there, combination of building lots of wind, solar, and other renewable energy resources, plus storage, plus demand response. So demand response is when utilities give people or companies incentives not to use electricity at certain times of the day. It helps to shift the time of electricity use. That is actually very effective at reducing demand. So, for example, last summer in California, there was a day where it was really hot, and it was predicted there might be a blackout. So the governor issued a warning, said people stop using your electricity in the afternoon, please. And just by sending a letter out, actually without spending any money, just sending out a letter to California, people stopped using their electricity and avoided a blackout that day, it was going to be a blackout if people didn't reduce their electricity consumption. And then going to heat pumps that are very efficient, going to more energy efficient appliances, that will help a lot. I mean, Texas, the energy use in Texas is about, I think the electricity use is 2 to 3 times that of California. And that's because California has instituted strict energy efficiency standards. So it's very energy efficient refrigerators, light bulbs and whatnot, and also tight homes. And if you just institute strong energy efficiency standards in places, there wouldn't be blackouts. Like Texas had these blackouts in the winter a couple of years ago because it got cold and there was a big demand on the grid, and the coal plants went down, the gas plants went down, nuclear plants went down, and some wind turbines froze. But there was a big demand for electricity, and that that demand could have been reduced substantially with energy efficiency measures in place. So there are a lot of ways to try to keep the grid stable, and those are some of them.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear those statistics about the places that are, producing that much energy through solely renewable technology. It's really inspiring to hear how it's working. So, it's clear that we have the technology. We know that we can generate the energy that we need through wind, water, and solar power. So how do we take that next step? How do we make this transition faster? How do we continue to build out our renewable energy infrastructure?
Well, I mean, if we don't do anything, we probably will transition, but too slowly, because the costs have come down so much for clean renewable energy that they are being implemented quite a bit. However, to get this timelines that we need, 80% by 2030, 100% by 2035 to 50, we do need strong policies to be put in place so renewable portfolio standards in each sector. Right now, there are a lot of renewable portfolio standards in the electric power sector, and then there are a few now in the transportation sector. Like California has a law to go to all new vehicles, 100% of new vehicles have to be battery electric effectively, or hydrogen fuel cell electric by 2035, with about, I think it was like 68% by 2030 and 35% by 2026. And about 40% of states follow California's lead. For the remaining 60% of states, the US EPA just proposed regulations that they're going to say that 60% of all new vehicles have to be battery electric effectively by 2030 and 68% by 2032. So that's not quite as strong as California's, but it is moving in the right direction. But we need more policies like that. And also in the building sector, we need national policies to electrify homes and commercial buildings and government buildings. And then also in the industrial sector, we need strong action. I mean, there are, like in Sweden, we now have green hydrogen steel production. So that eliminates 98% of carbon emissions associated with steel production. And that works. And it's so efficient that Sweden's going to switch all its plants to green hydrogen steel. And then there are 3 other countries in Europe that are proposing similar action. So we need this worldwide, not only in steel, but also other manufacturing to eliminate coal, oil, and gas, and biofuel and biomass combustion for heat and industrial processes, and go towards electrification for those high temperature processes. So it's really a combination of individual action, community action, and strong policies at state and national levels.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And like, I'm curious what you think about in terms of policy changes, the amount of subsidies that we have right now towards the fossil fuel industry. Do you talk about in your book, changing that and directing more subsidies towards renewable energy technology instead?
Yeah, there is a lot of subsidy going toward the fossil fuel industry and also nuclear as well. And certainly, certainly like either taxing the fossil fuel industry or removing their subsidies and shifting them over more to renewables. Renewables do get some subsidies now, but the key is we can't be on the same playing field. It can't be just it's either natural gas or renewables. And so sometimes they go for natural gas, sometimes they go for renewables. We need 100% new generation has to be renewable. 100% of new vehicles have to be battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell. 100% of new buildings have to be all electric. 100% of new industry has to be electric. And then we have to transition all the existing. So, trying to get rid of subsidies from fossil fuels is one tactic, and are shifting them to renewables. But the other tactic again is just these renewable portfolio standards. So there are different ways to accomplish this. Although I think the renewable portfolio standards are the strongest and easiest to actually implement, because it's easier for people to be for something than against it. So when you say, let's go 100% renewables, that's a lot easier to support than, well, let's go even zero carbon, or no zero fossil fuels, because that means taking away something. And just even though they accomplish the exact same thing, it's just mentally easier for people to support a positive thing like 100% renewables. And in fact, there have been public opinion polls on this showing that over 82% of the people in 15 countries, or 26,000 people who are asked, and including in the US, 82% of people supported 100% renewable energy. But at the same time, only about 69% of the same people believe that climate change is an important problem. So the good news is people believe in the solution, even if they don't believe in the problem. So that's a good situation to be in. So let's take advantage of that people like renewable energy and like the solution. So let's focus on the positive. And if we focus on the positive, then, I think we'll get past a tipping point of people supporting it. And then we'll basically eliminate fossil fuels eventually.
Awesome. Thank you. I also wanted to ask, in light of the most recent IPCC report, which was released at the end of March, that, once again reiterated the urgency of the climate crisis, is there anything that you would go back and add to this book, or anything that you would want to, make sure you're getting across to our policymakers about the importance of transitioning to renewable energy?
Well, I'm pretty happy with the content of the book. There's always new things that come up, new technologies that come up every few weeks but the basic premise has stayed the same, and I wouldn't change anything in the basic premise in the basic technologies for each of these sectors. And I do want to stress that, I've covered, in the book, I'll not only cover energy emissions, but there are also some non-energy emissions. So energy accounts for about 90% of air pollution emissions and about 75 to 80%, I think, of greenhouse gas emissions. But there are non-energy emissions that IPCC stresses as well, and that I do talk about in the book that we have to address, including biomass burning and like methane emissions from landfills, from manure, from the digestive tracts of sheep and cattle, from rice fields, and nitrous oxide emissions from fertilizers, halogen emissions. Halogens account for about 9% of all global warming. But a lot of them are like embedded halogens that have been there for a long time, like CFC 13, CFC 11, and CFC 12, which are chlorofluorocarbons. have been there for a while. But we'll have to eliminate all those either emissions or the atmospheric concentrations of them over time to really get to back to a normal situation. But energy is the predominant part, and the solutions is a really clear solution. It's eliminating emissions and eliminating emissions. So yeah, I guess the one thing I think IPCC is kind of glosses over is they're not saying you definitely need carbon capture, but they do support it quite a bit. And they say that we need some kind of carbon capture, but without really explaining and realizing that it's just a lot more efficient to use energy, renewable energy, that is, to replace a fossil fuel than to try to take carbon out of the air, because stopping the emissions of 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide is exactly the same as taking 1 kilogram of carbon dioxide out of the air. So it's just a lot more efficient to stop its emissions, because then you eliminate the air pollution associated with the carbon dioxide, the energy source, and the mining and the infrastructure. Whereas if you take CO2 out of the air, you're allowing that the pollution emissions, the mining, and the infrastructure of the fossil fuels to stay. So that's just an opportunity cost, and they don't really recognize that. And that's one thing I'll fault the IPCC, is also supporting certain nuclear power, where nuclear power is ridiculous. It doesn't help anything, because it takes the Vogtle plant, which is 2 reactors, been years 17 and 18 now, and they're still not operating. They've laid enough cement for a sidewalk between Miami and Seattle, and so put up huge amounts of CO2 in the air, haven't generated a single kilowatt hour. They cost $34 billion for 2.3 gigawatts. It's over $15 a watt versus $1 a watt for new wind or solar. And the levelized cost of energy is about 7 to 8 times that of new wind or solar. So it only takes 1 to 3 years to put new wind or solar up. So why wait an extra 15 years to pay for something 7 to 8 times more? And then you also have these energy insecurity problems, weapons proliferation risk, meltdown risk, waste issues, uranium mining risk. And plus, there's about 9 to 37 times the CO2 emissions per kilowatt hour of new nuclear versus new wind. And so why would you, it's just an opportunity cost. Why would you waste your money on that?
Right. I have one more question for you, and then we are going to take some questions from the audience. So for folks who are watching, if you have questions, go ahead and drop those in the Q&A now. So you have been really vocal in writing opinion pieces and doing media appearances, and have been part of sign-on letters with Food and Water Watch to mobilize scientists to pressure the administration to rein in fossil fuels and reject industry scams like carbon capture. So in your opinion, why do you think it's so important for scientists to speak out on these issues?
Well, if scientists, not that everybody listens to scientists, many people don't listen to scientists, but I think we have some information that's, especially those of us who are doing current research, we have new information that should hopefully be helpful to society. And I think so. I think there's an ability to provide information that's not otherwise available. Like, yeah, some of our raw research, we did a lot of research on wind energy mapping, for example, a while ago, and uncovered some resources, local locations of strong winds, and did some calculations of what are the global wind resources. And if people don't otherwise know this information, in fact, without our energy plans, we're just guessing what would happen. Like, not to say that the energy plans we develop for a state or a country or worldwide is correct, but it's an effort to quantify, and that can always be improved upon. And unless you have a plan and some justification for that plan, then people don't know what to do. Like, especially on this large scale, where we're talking worldwide scale, what do we do? If we don't have a plan that shows that if we take this steps, we can solve the problem, then people are just guessing. And it just becomes a back and forth argument that nobody believes anybody, once you have a quantifiable plan, then at least people can evaluate it. People can look at the numbers and say, okay, that's reasonable, or at least shoot for something. In the end, it'll probably look different than the original plan, but it provides a goal for communities and states and countries to shoot for. And fortunately, actually we started our first plan in 2009, and things have gone in the right direction, maybe a little bit too slowly, but they have gone in the right direction. Costs of renewables have come down, batteries have come down, heat pump costs have come down, electric vehicle costs, and we've developed new technologies, and there's more and more renewables being put up every year. So you need a plan first to develop policies, I think. And that's one of the things scientists can do, is provide scientific plans that people can evaluate and then hopefully adopt if it's worthwhile.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, I'm going to take our first audience question. So this one says, utilities and dirty energy companies are promoting renewable natural gas as part of their clean energy efforts. Can you discuss a bit about RNG? And also, thank you so much for all of your awesome work.
Oh, thanks. Well, we need to eliminate all combustion. So renewable natural gas, what they call renewable natural gas, usually from, let's say, biomethane, or it can be from landfills. They're still burning it, so that's not a good use of it. I mean, if you're going to capture, I mean, some people argue, well, if you just let the landfill methane go to the air, then it'll have a high global warming potential and turn into CO2 and still cause problems. Well, I think the best application of something from a landfill is, okay, you can produce some hydrogen through steam reforming there, then you're not burning it. And then you can use the hydrogen in a fuel cell for a different application, or you can use the hydrogen to produce steel or something. So there you're converting methane to CO2 directly, so without having to go through the methane, but you're also getting some energy, but no air pollution. So you're eliminating the air pollution in that step. So that's what we need, are, kind of ideas that eliminate the main problems. Just taking natural gas from a landfill and then burning it like you burn regular natural gas, that just continues with this air pollution. You produce NOx, oxides of hydrogen, produce ozone, you produce, there's ammonia coming out of there as well. And, there's just a lot of issues. So we want to electrify everything, eliminate combustion. And so, that is literally, I would only say that application of natural gas from, let's say, landfills is really the only energy source I can think of offhand where using some biomaterial is useful, because otherwise that would have just gone straight to the air. But again, no burning of it.
Great, thank you. All right, let's see. Next one. Someone's asking, here in Los Angeles, the challenge is moving the Department of Water and Power. Can you talk about the challenge we face in localities to move our utilities who don't want to change or who don't want to let go of their control of utility decisions?
Yeah, utilities are often against change, or they want to change very slowly, although some are more progressive than others. So definitely need pressure put on them, maybe at the state level, but consumer choices, because now there are, well, in California especially, you have community choice aggregation utilities. So you can shift from your normal utility to any community choice aggregation utility in California. There are dozens of them, and they will provide 100% renewables. And the more people shift, the more pressure put on the regular utilities like SoCal Edison or PG&E to also adopt 100% renewables. So I think even PG&E is starting to try to get higher renewables in their mixtures, or at least offer some higher renewables as an option. But I'd say, all in all, the California utilities are more progressive than some Midwestern utilities that still rely a lot on coal. So I think it is all relative, but all of them really, it's in their best interest to think forward and go to, because we are going to go to 100% renewables. California has a law to be effectively 100% renewables by 2045, with, I think it was 60% by 2030. And we're already at like a little over 50% renewables, counting, if you count large hydro in there.
Great. All right, we've got another question. what does this transition look like for people and communities who currently rely on fossil fuel industry jobs? How do we support a transition of our workforce to support the development of clean, renewable energy?
Yeah, that's an important question. And while we do find that we would create more long-term full-time jobs than lost with a transition in the US, for example, about 3 to 4 million more, although some states would lose jobs because they're very heavily into the fossil fuels. But we do need retraining of jobs. And in the Inflation Reduction Act, there is there's an effort to retrain people. So I don't claim to have the full answer. I do know that in the end, we will have more jobs than we did before. But that doesn't mean some people won't suffer in the meantime if they lose their jobs and it's not easy for them to find a new one. But there are, like in West Virginia, there are new factories being built to replace coal workers, and to factories in renewable energy. I forget if it was solar or batteries, but and there's also development of solar, for example, in West Virginia. So there are options. Oil workers, offshore oil workers are moving towards offshore wind. That's a very natural transition. But yeah, the good effort does have to be put in place to retrain people, because we don't want anybody to be left behind, and we want this to be a positive experience for everybody.
Great. All right, another technical question for you. What role does geothermal play in the transition to clean energy?
Well, there are 13 states in the US that have good geothermal electricity resources, and that means that the temperatures deep down into the ground are hot enough to produce steam to generate electricity. But every state has plenty of geothermal for heating, just for home heating and building heating. So geothermal heat pumps will be useful. So they're in mild climates like California, air source heat pumps are useful. You just extract heat from the air. But in cold climates, like in, let's say, New York, you would more likely use ground source heat pumps, so extracting heat from the ground for home and building heating. And temperatures under the ground are pretty stable, even if there's snow on the ground. And so they're very useful. In fact, they're even more efficient than air source heat pumps. So geothermal heating will be definitely useful for heating buildings in extreme climates, but also in some states and countries, electricity generation too.
Awesome. All right, let's do this question next. It often feels like there's so much gridlock in Congress, or we're moving in the wrong direction, like with President Biden approving the Willow Project. So what gives you hope that we can do this?
Well, I mean, besides running the numbers and saying, yeah, it's technically possible to do it, I mean, I do see a lot of support, public support for transition to renewables, more public support than policymaker support, which is, I mean, I think the people in the public want to transition more than some lawmakers. But just the fact that there is a big growth going on because the costs have come down. In fact, if we look in the US, the states that have the highest percentage of their electricity from wind, 9 of the 10 states are all red states, so to speak, that have the most electricity from wind in terms of percent. And those states don't have policies. They don't have 100% renewable energy standards. So it's because it's so cheap. So their policies have moved the needle quite a bit in states where policies are, but just the low cost has moved the needle in other states, and same with other countries. And so, but the fact that the costs have gone down in generation, batteries, heat pumps, electric vehicles, other types of storage, this all gives me hope that we're on the right path. And so I mean, I know we can do it technically, so that's actually what gives me the most hope. So it's really a question of, I think, educating the public and policymakers and having good examples where this we see it working. The more examples we can show, then I think that helps to speed up the transition.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that there's more public support than political support, but that's why we're here. That's why we have experts like you speaking out, and we've got all of our members here tonight speaking out, so that we can really make sure that our members of Congress hear from us and know that this is, we're all behind this. This is what we need. All right, let's take one more question, and then we're coming up on the top of the hour, so we'll probably wrap up after that. But we had a couple of people who were asking questions about heat pumps. So I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit more about that and how they compare in energy use to high efficiency. I think one question was specifically about high efficiency air conditioning.
Well, so heat pumps work for both heating and cooling. So they are an air conditioner, except an air conditioner doesn't run in reverse for heating. So like a refrigerator is basically the same as a heat pump, except the refrigerator doesn't do heating, it just does cooling. So, but in terms of the heating, like a heat pump will use 1/4 the energy as natural gas or even electric resistance. So an electric, heat pump runs on electricity, and electric resistance heater also runs on electricity, but you need 1/4 the energy to run an electric heat pump than an electric resistance heater. And that's because you're not creating heat with a heat pump, you're just moving it around. And that just takes a lot less energy than creating heat, like with electric resistance. And natural gas is even less efficient than electric resistance. So in terms of heating, you can't beat a heat pump. It's the smallest possible amount of heat, and heat pumps are even getting better. And ground source heat pumps are even more efficient than air source heat pumps on average. But in terms of air conditioning, so the heat pump is already similar to an air conditioner. An air conditioner is doing a similar thing, but the fact is the heat pump will run in both directions for heating and cooling. And so, whereas the air conditioner, you're just doing the cooling, and you're not doing any heating. And heat pumps now are pretty efficient, so they're about as top of the line in terms of efficiencies you can get.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I am going to wrap us up on Q&A before I just do a couple of quick reminders and reshare the link in the chat for people to win a copy of your book. So before I close this out, I'm just curious if you have any closing thoughts for us this evening before we wrap up.
Well, I think I just suggest to stay positive. I mean, I do feel positive. We can solve this problem when we work together and we keep our focus on the ball, and we focus on the technologies that we know are working, that we know are clean, that we know are simple, that we know are not like just keeping some industry alive, the fossil fuel industry in particular. So yeah, just stay positive and try, educate your friends, people around you, your kids, your parents, and I think, and also just try to, as much as you can, try to transition your own life. That's, slow piece by piece. Anything, any little bit helps. So yeah, we'll just keep up the good fight, and we'll solve this problem together. Don't despair.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate that. I just want to thank you again so much for joining us this evening and for all of your leadership, from the early days of the fight to ban fracking in New York through to today, and everything that you're doing to move us off fossil fuels and onto renewable energy. We thank you so much and are just really grateful for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks. And to everybody who's watching, don't forget to add your name to our drawing to win your very own copy of Mark's book, No Miracles Needed. Be sure to fill out that survey tonight, and I'll be contacting our 3 winners tomorrow morning. It's really informative and just so clearly lays out all of the incredible technology that we already have at our disposal and the path ahead. And before I let you all go, I just have a couple of quick reminders. First up, the match. As many of you likely know, Food and Water Watch doesn't take any corporate funding. Our support comes from people like you. So I encourage you to make a donation today. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we have our special $4 matched for every $1 you donate that runs until midnight tonight. And we are fighting for this future without fossil fuels, and every day we're making progress toward that. And as we just heard from Mark, we have the technology that we need. We just need to continue to stand up to the fossil fuel industry and build the political will. And we are, in less than a year, New York City passed a gas ban, and now we're about to pass a statewide version of that ban. Earlier this year in January, we and our allies passed a ban on new oil and gas extraction and a phase out of existing drilling in unincorporated Los Angeles County. And last summer, we banned fracking in Allegheny County parks in Western Pennsylvania, protecting thousands of acres in the heart of fracking territory from the fossil fuel industry. So, it's not easy, but these victories days add up, and it's together that we're making it happen, and we can't do it without you. So if you can, please consider making a gift tonight as we wrap up to help us keep up this fight for a livable future. And I also just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who has already donated tonight. We are so grateful for your support. And next, I do hope that you'll join us again next month for our next Livable Future Live event talking about the Farm Bill. We'll put the link in the chat one more time where you can sign up for that as well. And I know that we did share a few links today, including the information on how to contact your member of Congress and join our phone bank tomorrow, telling Congress to stop subsidizing fossil fuels. So I will send out an email tomorrow morning with all of those links, along with the recording of tonight's conversation. Please feel free to share both of those with friends, family, and colleagues. It will take all of us to make this future a reality. So please feel free to share those resources widely. Later tonight, you'll get an automated email or text from me asking you to submit feedback about today's event. Please do leave a comment. We love hearing your thoughts on our monthly discussions. And that's all. Thank you so much again for joining us for this special Earth Day installment of our Livable Future Live event series. We appreciate your time and all that you do to help us protect our planet. So I hope that you all have a wonderful evening, and I will see you next month. Thank you.